Prescription drug costs are a concern for all of us, and as a result, there's been a lot of focus on generic versus brand name drugs. Cesar Chacon is the owner of the Insurance Hub and a licensed broker, and he's here to help us understand the difference, especially when it comes to Medicare. Welcome back. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again. Appreciate that.
Drug costs are certainly something that I feel like is always in the news. We're always concerned about, and I feel like we're sort of conditioned to think generic is always cheaper.
Yep.
Is this not true?
Well, first of all, there's a lot to unpackage with everything that's going on with drug prices and insulin's getting cheaper and being more affordable for folks. But there's also that dreaded donut hole that's out there, and there's something lately with the substitution of drugs that's been a little bit of a problem.
Okay, what is the dreaded donut hole? What does that refer to?
It's I guess the best way to explain that is it's that that hole in your coverage during the year where you have to pay a portion of the brand name, if you will. So you pay a higher cost. So it's essentially you go through and you pay your copays, and then you hit that hole where you have no coverage, or essentially you pay a big portion of the coverage, and then you get out. Eventually, you get out. It's very hard to explain sometimes, and a lot of folks don't understand it.
Well, it's very frustrating, I think, for all of us, how complicated this has to be. So when I'm looking at different Medicare plans, when I'm analyzing Part D or the plan I have, how do I know what type of prescription drug is best for me?
Well, you know, that's actually one of those conversations. Again, it'll take a while, but I think the biggest issue that we're seeing today with some of my clients is there's a problem with substitution of drugs. So let's just say that we picked a plan for you during open enrollment, and you end up going to the pharmacy, and let's just say it's a brand name. Well, unless your physician or prescriber says it's got to be medically necessary, the pharmacist can essentially change that from a brand name to a generic name. The problem is, yeah, it could be cheaper, but the problem is that that generic may not be in the formulary that you have. Like I said, a lot to unpackage, right?
Yeah.
So every drug plan, every Medicare plan has what's called a formulary. So this formulary may have this drug, and this formulary may have this other drug, and so forth. So if you have this plan and it's covering your brand names, but then the pharmacist says it's not medically necessary according to your physician, we're going to give you a generic. They give you the generic, it's going to cost more because that drug may not be on your formulary.
And I've seen that list before, formulary and non-formulary, which is not something most of us understand. So as a consumer, what do I do? Do I have the conversation with my physician?
Yeah.
And what conversation do I have? How do I help myself?
There's a lot of folks out there that cannot take the generic brand names for whatever reason.
Sure.
They have to take the brand names. So what they need to ask their provider or their prescriber is they have to make sure that the prescription have those exact words medically necessary, or else the pharmacist will substitute the brand names for the generic. It's very important, medically necessary, or else you go with brand names.
So if your doctor wants you to take this versus that with no substitutions, it needs to be noted. Is this something we should also be asking the pharmacist about? Well,
the pharmacists are the ones that are regulated by they look at the prescription drug plan and they see that it's a brand name, and they see that there's a generic attached. They don't know what's in your formulary or what is or what isn't. And that's happened to a lot of my clients, and so it was one of those things that we saw that it was really problematic this year. And so we ended up talking to a lot of our clients saying, hey, make sure on these brand names that your physician says it's medically necessary. It's a new problem that I've seen this year that I haven't seen before.
And is it okay to ask questions of the pharmacist, mostly because of cost? Like I know when someone hands me a $90 prescription cost, and I was like, whoa, why is this so expensive? Should the pharmacist be able to say, well, your insurance didn't cover it?
Right.
Call them? I always wonder, who do we question? I don't want to yell at the wrong person.
Well, the answer is yes. I did get a call from a couple of my clients in Venice, and whatever they were saying didn't make sense. So I got the pharmacist on the line with them, and we were able to work out that whole substitution of drugs. And then we ended up getting the physician involved, and that's when they said, okay, now we understand. Because it was going to cost them 3 times as much getting to a generic versus the brand name.
I have found that if you can have the pharmacist at least say, well, this is what he wrote
Yeah.
for, meaning the doctor,
Yeah.
and this is what we submitted
Yeah.
to the insurance,
Right.
and this is what came back. And then you can sort of piece together, okay, I need to call insurance and ask why it's so expensive,
Yeah.
and then I need to call the doctor and say, is there another alternative?
Yeah, that's correct. It's I tell you, during this time period, a lot of folks end up hitting that donut hole that I'm talking about, and they end up having to pay more for their prescription drugs during this time period where they have that hole in their coverage. The best thing to do is not freak out. Call somebody like our company and the Insurance Hub, and we can kind of go through that. There's a lot of foundations out there that can help with insulins, can help with blood thinners, a lot of these expensive medications that are out there.
Yeah, ask questions.
Yes,
and
ask questions.
Yeah, and if you don't know if you're not getting the answers you want, ask an expert. And that's certainly what Cesar is all about. You can get more help with all of your insurance questions by going to theinsurancehub.net. We'll be right back.